Right, so this is what we want to have a look today. At least this part, if you can see. So let me go to the paint. I think I have the topology. Yes. So this is the topology we are going to work. Another pod is as well there. We can do it on this same thing. This is complete physical. That one is the virtual one. Sandeep, you can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Which one is physical one? Which one is I didn't get.
So the topology which is on your screen is a complete physical pod.
Okay,
The one which I showed you yesterday uh, is the virtual pod,
okay.
but ultimately the same thing, right?
Yeah, that
So,
is fine.
okay, this is the topology we are going to work today. Let me just, so before going ahead, I'll explain you first what it is. Okay, so in this topology, you can see I have one FTD, which is ASA 5525. This is the series of ASA 5525 series. On this ASA, what we have done, we have just added few more SSD drives and we have reimaged it with the FTD OS or a unified image. So once that is done, you will have the access to a complete new CLI. It's no more ASA now. It's your FTD. Okay, so this is what we have. As I explained you have multiple options. Either you can use your ASA or you can use a VM version of it, or you can buy a dedicated device which is meant for FTD only. Okay, we have both. We have virtual as well as your FTD running over ASA. And also you can see on this screen the way they have connected is this is my user PC, which is connected to a 9300 switch, which then is linearly connected to your FTD on port gig 0 by 0. Another port I have on my FTD, which is gig 0 by 1, which is connected to another 9300 switch, which then connected to your, you can say, customer edge router. This is my gateway, which is connected to an ISP. So this 29221 series router is connected to ISP. So that's the simple design what we have. Now talking about this management, I have one shared switch. In this switch, what I have, this is L3. Okay, this is logically I'm telling you. The green one is my management plane. So this is my Ethernet 0 on my FTD, or you can say the management port. And I also have a management port on my FMC. As we discussed it yesterday, FMC is a controller, is a separate appliance itself. It can be virtual or it can be physical. In our case, it is virtual. Okay. For virtual, you need to have license. We'll talk about licenses more in upcoming sections. So the way I have connected both FMC and my FTD so that they can communicate with each other. This is admin PC. So this is my laptop. Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm also connected to the same network. These IPs are reachable from my system. Okay. What I'm going to do from my PC, if I want to configure FTD, first I need to browse to this IP. This is my FMC IP. Where it is configured on the management port. When you are installing your FMC, it will ask you for the basic things. What is your IP, domain, DNS, and gateway? So that's the bootstrap config what we have. These FMC and FTD are freshly installed. They only have this IP configured, this management IP on the interfaces, nothing else. So now what I'm going to do from this PC, I'm going to browse this IP to 52.151. This will give me the access to the FMC GUI. On FMC, I need to integrate my FTD. How you are going to do this? First, you need to begin with your FTD. On FTD, you will say configure manager, and this is going to be your IP. This is going to be your manager IP on FTD. Once this is done, as I told you, there's a port. The port is 8305. If you remember, on this port, the connection, the channel will be established. I told you there will be two channel, event as well as control. So you will be seeing two tunnels, two virtual tunnels between these two. Okay. So we'll start with FTD first, and then we'll go ahead with FMC. Before that, I'll show you the CLI. That's how when you log in to your FMC, this is simple SSH on this IP on port 22. Okay, on FTD, you need to do SSH or telnet on port 22 on this IP. So that's what I've done. This is my FMC. Okay, that's how you land in your FMC. Now, if at this point, if you want to see the config, you can say if config, it's a Linux based terminal, it will tell you my IP is 10.106.52.151. All right. Also, that's how your FTD looks like. This mode is known as your clish mode. Let me do one thing. Let me put it in this way so that both can be in front of you at the same time. No, I think it's okay. So I have taken the SSH of the boxes. First thing we'll configure FTD. On FTD, we'll say configure manager and this IP and a password, a key. So this is my FTD. I will say configure manage. Okay, before that, I'll show you. This is a clish mode, right? I don't have a capability to say configure terminal. There is nothing like configure terminal here. All you can do is you can run a basic show command. Show interface IP brief if you want to see. Show mode if you want to see. Single. Show firewall. It will tell you it is now in a router mode. I can also see there are few config which is on this box. So what I am going to do first, let me wipe out this config. Okay, so that we can again start from scratch. But yeah, if you want to see if there is any manager which is configured, the manager is not configured. It will tell you no manager is configured. Okay, but yeah, there are interface config. We need to remove that. So now if you have seen that my firewall mode is router, it means currently it is deployed as a L3 firewall. What I'm going to do if I want to wipe out all the config, it's a kind of a trick, or you can say a shortcut, which will remove your interface based config if you change your mode from one to another. So I'm going to change my mode from routed to transparent. It says if you do this, this will wipe out all the config on the interfaces. I want to do that, so I'll say yes. But if I see now show firewall, it will tell you now I'm in a transparent mode. You can do that anytime, but if you have a manager configured, whether it's FDM or whether it's FMC, it won't allow you to change the mode. If you want to change the mode, first you need to unregister it. Let me go back and let me say my mode I want to is routing. I'll say yes. Says mode has been changed successfully. Show firewall. Now it's in router mode. If I do show interface IP brief now, I should not be able to see the config on it. All these are just loopback and a brief. So the config has been wiped out. Now it's a clean device. What I'm going to do on my FTD, I will say configure manager and your FMC IP. Who is my FMC here? The FMC IP is this guy. Even the diagram you can see 52.151 is my FMC. I can paste this IP. Now it will ask a key. Okay, you need to say configure manager add. It will ask a registration key. You need to keep a note of it because later you won't be able to see this. It will be encrypted. So now what I'm saying on FTD, I'm saying configuring my manager whose address is this, which is your FMC, and the key is Cisco. This is one side job as of now. Okay, we have only mentioned it on the FTD. It also gives you a suggestion to keep a note of your registration key because you will need this while registering your FTD into the FMC. So it's a two-way process. First, you need to tell on FTD who is your FMC. On FMC, you need to tell who is your managed device. So one side is done. Let me do it for the other as well. This is my FMC, but FMC you cannot do from CLI. You need to do it from the GUI. One more thing, before you attempt uh, uh, your integration between your FMC and FTD, I told you yesterday there are two prerequisites. First is that IP reachability must be there, and second is the port must be allowed. So in my lab, there is no firewall, so I'm not worried about that. Firewall in between FMC and FTD. I need to check the basic connectivity. How can I do that? This is Linux, so you need to use Linux based commands. Route hyphen I will tell you what is your default gateway. 52.1 is my default gateway. Now, if you want to do a ping to which IP? My FTD IP. From the diagram, you can see the FTD IP is 10.197.2.10.105. If I do a ping now, it is not going to work. Since we are in an admin mode of my Linux, you need to have a permission of a root level. I think the password is wrong. Here it is asking you to enter a password for your FTD, the CLI password. Sorry, for FMC. I'm on FMC right now. Okay, so FMC password is this. It's a security precautions which they have now added in the FTD or FMC. As soon as you log in and if you want to move to the root level, they will ask you the password. So now I'm doing a ping from FMC to FTD. It is going fine. I told you there is a port which needs to be allowed, and the communication is going to happen. The tunnel, the SF tunnel, is going to be built on port number 8305. So let's see if the port is currently active or listening on something or not. I'll grab the port number, which is 8305. It says not all process can be identified. It basically says you don't have the complete privilege to look at this. So I will move to my root level. Now I'm in root. If I run this command, currently it's not listening on port 8305. Let's run the same command on FTD as well. But now, as I told you, this is a clish mode, which has very limited features. You can just run the show commands. There is nothing like conft. It is Not going to go because FTD can be managed through FMC or FDM, not by the CLI. Now, if you want to see the config or the IP on your management interface, the command is show network. It will tell you what all you have configured while installing the FTD, including the IP. Now you can see my IP is 10.197.2.10.105 and my gateway is 10.197.20.1 and the management port is 8305. On this port only, we are going to establish the SF tunnel. Okay, but now if I want to ping FMC, what is my FMC IP? The FMC IP is
10.106.52.
correct. So let me,
1.1.
now if I ping 10.106 from 52.151, I'm doing a ping from my FTD to FMC in a clish mode. It is not going to work because when you are doing a ping from clish mode, it will use a data plane interface. Which are your data plane interface? Let me show you. All these interfaces are part of your data plane, but currently it's not, none of them is configured. You want to use your management, and if you look at closely, you won't see any IP on management 0/0 because this is not the command to see the IP on management. If you want to see the IP on the management, you need to run the command show network. It will tell you the interface, which is your BR1, and that's the IP which is configured here. So now if you want to ping anyone using your management interface as a source, you need to say ping system and the IP. Now it is going to ping using your management port, so which is working fine. So I am reachable. And if you don't want to do that, right? Let's say you don't want to uh, use your system interface to check the reachability, you can go to the expert mode. This expert mode is like what you have on your FMC. It's a Linux mode. Now, if you want to try to ping from Linux terminal to your FMC, you should be able to. Right? If you want to move from admin to root mode, you can just put the IP here and you are in a root mode. All right. As I said, let's check if my port 8305 is active or not. So by default, when you bring the box up right after your reimage, this port 8305 would be inactive. Your FTD won't be listening on that. It will start listening on it as soon as you enter the configure manager add command, which we have added. So now it should start listening on port 8305. So you can see this is my local IP 105. This is remote FMC because it is not added into the FMC yet. And I'm currently listening from my SF tunnel. And FMC it's not even open because you have not added, you have not done anything on FMC. You have so far configured your FTD only. Now, if I move out of these terminals, if I go back in my clish mode, if I see show managers, it will tell you you are 151. The registration key you must have noted down or you must remember, which our case is Cisco. Registration status is currently pending, and it is your FMC whose registration is pending. Let's do that. Let's go to your FMC. You need to browse to this IP. What is your IP? Let me, yes, you need to browse to your IP. This is your IP. Let's browse this. If I go to this IP or in a new browser, you will see we'll land on FMC. It's little slow, That's why I've already logged in here. So we are currently on FMC. So as soon as you log in, or you will land up here directly. This is your dashboard. So just a quick walkthrough. So if you look at here, this is my dashboard, which gives you a summary on a single screen that who are top attackers, what all the intrusion events which has recently happened, total number of events on a per application basis, your intrusion events, top targets, and a lot more information what you need to have for your monitoring. But currently there is no data because we have not onboarded anything. There's a window you can change it. Max is 1 year. So you'll use this for your analysis, for your reporting purpose. Now, the first thing is, if you want to add your device, we'll talk about these later. The first task is, if you want to add, go to the devices, go to the device management. You can see an option here, which is add. I will say I want to add a device. It will ask you what is the IP of your device which you want to add. What is the IP of FTD? It's 10.197.2.10 or 105. It will be displayed as FTD1 or whatever name, whatever relevant name you want to give. I'm putting it as FTD1. So on my FMC, it will be displayed as FTD-1. Key which you had mentioned on your FTD while registering, which was Cisco in our case. Group, if you want to add this to a group, then you can do a group here. But before adding this into a group, from this drop down, you need to create a group. Group is generally used when you have multiple FTDs which you want to put under a same group. Let's say group flow 10. In flow 10, if you have 10 FTDs, if you want to keep them as a single group, then you will use this. Access control policy. So that's where the change is. So if you remember in ASA, this is my ASA. Who is going to decide the traffic flow? This is my inside interface, which has a security level 100. This is my outside interface, which has security level of 0. So high to low was allowed by default. And for low to from low security level to high, you need to have a ACL to allow that traffic. That's the phenomenon of your ASA. But there is no security level concept in FTD. If you're familiar with zone-based firewall, FTD is similar to that. Every interface in FTD is a separate zone itself. This is a separate zone. This green is a separate zone. If you have one more interface configured, that comes under a separate zone. So by default, no one can talk with anyone. There's no high to low, low to high concept, right? No one can communicate with any of the other interface. You getting me? This, let's say this is your FTD. And if you have 3 interfaces, unlike ASA, there's no security level concept. You need to assign these interfaces to some zone. Let's say I'm assigning this to an inside zone, and I'm assigning this interface to outside zone, and this one to DMZ zone. Just a name. It is not going to assign any security level based on the name. It's just a name. Now, all these interfaces have the same trust level. If this is my FTD in middle, right, I cannot move from, let's say, from inside to DMZ. This is not allowed. From inside to outside, this is not allowed. No communication is allowed by default. Within zone, you can communicate. because then in that case you are not even reaching the firewall, you are communicating with each other directly, not through your firewall, right? But you cannot move from one zone to another one. That's the principle of your FTD. If you want any to any communication, you need to have a ACL in place. So by default, implicitly everything is denied. But this implicit behavior of denying everything, you will be configuring that. So now FTD is a blank box. It will be, you can use it in the way you want. If you want to say that by default, do not allow communication between any of the zones, you have that capability. And if you want to say allow the communication between all the zones, you can do that as well. But then why you are using the firewall, right? So that's not going to make sense. But the base policy, right, which is implicitly deny, you can configure it. So that's what you need to configure here. It will ask you access control policy. This is the base policy. So in drop down, I'm not seeing any option. It will tell you create a new policy. I'm creating one. I'm giving a name, deny all, because I want to deny everything. So I'll say there is no base policy. The default action for this policy is deny all. From where to where? From anywhere to anywhere. It's deny. If I am having in this diagram, if I'm going to have two zones inside and outside, communication is not allowed between the zones. That's how it is. All right, there are other actions also, which is your intrusion prevention. It means you don't want to use the L3 or L2 or L4 filtering. You just want every traffic to go through your IPS. There's another default action, which is your network discovery, that you don't want any filtering. You just want to discover the endpoints, the users, the application running on the network. It's kind of a discovery. So generally you will see we'll do a deny all, block all traffic, which means implicit deny. I will call this deny all here. Now it tells you about the smart licensing. As I told you, FTD has a lot of features. It has a capability of your ASA plus IPS plus additional features. So those additional features requires license. So this malware license is for your file and malware policy. If you want to have that policy or that capability, this is for your threat detection, and this is for your URL filtering. So when I'm selecting it, I'm saying for this FTD, I want to enable all these licenses. All right. I'm not doing any NAT between FTD and FMC. I'll leave this. Transfer packets for my analysis, right, on the dashboard. I want to transfer the packets to my FMC, because FMC you can use as an event viewer. You can use your FMC dashboard to see the events, to analysis the reporting. So that's one more advantage of your FMC over FDM. On FDM, you don't have that capability. When I'm saying transfer packets, I want to transfer those packets for my FMC for the analysis, so that it can read those packets and give the data in a graphical way, in a chart way or other analytical way. Here now I'll say register. At this point, it is going to take some time. Once this is done, what currently I'm doing, I'm currently configuring my FMC to add this, FTD. Once this is complete, I should be able to see my FTD here on the dashboard. From the CLI, I'll show you it should have established two channels between the FTD and FMC on port 8305 for the SF tunnel. Generally takes between 2 to 5 minutes. All right, looks like this is done for us. What I can see currently, it's syncing with the FTD. This is my FTD. This is the IP what I've given. This is the model. I'm running ASA 5525X series with SSD drives. The version of FTD is 6.2.3. The licenses which are there is my base license, threat license, malware license, and URL filtering. So all the possible licenses are now enabled. It says access control policy, which is currently showing as none. Let's wait for sync this to get complete. Also now, if I take a look at my FTD, if I do a show manager now, it tells you your manager is 52.151 and the registration status is completed. Let me move to the admin mode and let's see the status. Previously it was listening. Now it has established one channel, which is the control, and looking forward for the second one, currently in the listening state. Soon you'll be able to see both has established. Let's check on the GUI. So this is my FTD. Let's go back. If you want to go to your FTD, how you can go? Devices. Let me go to the overview first so that I can show you the navigation. The problem with FTD is that it's little slow. You'll feel a little lag if you compare it with the other device. You can go to device management, and here you can see all the devices which are now integrated with this FMC. It is showing as ungrouped because we have not configured any group. If you want to configure the groups, from here you can. But since we have only one FTD, so we are good with that without any group. Now this is the FTD. Now the next thing is I'm just waiting for this to get established so that now both our channels are established. So your FTD is now successfully integrated with your FMC. And both the channels, the control channel and event channel, is now established. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'll move forward. Let's see how you configure the interfaces on the FTD. And after that, I will explain you a little theory about the deployment modes, the interface modes, and the licensing. Now, from this point, now you have registered your FTD on your FMC. You don't need these CLIs. If you still want to have these CLIs, you can just for the show purpose. You can say show interface IP brief. So I'm seeing there's no IP configured on the interfaces, right? So the purpose of the CLI is now over. From this point, if I want to configure FTD, let's do the configuration. All right, let's configure the interfaces. Hope you can see it. So I'm going to configure gig Ethernet 0 by 0 with this IP and gig Ethernet 0 by 1 with this IP. All right. Also, as this is my host, later on when we are going further in the lab, we will be doing testing like policies, if user is able to access particular website or not. So we will be doing all this testing on this user. So on my FTD, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this gig 0 by 0 in a zone which is my inside zone, assuming this is my internal user, and this gig 0 by 1 I'm going to put in a outside zone. You can give any name. You can say black and white, north, south, anything, because now there is no dependency or no relevancy of the name or the levels. It all depends how you configure your policies now. All right. Once this is done, this interface task is done. Since I don't have any routing information on my FTD, so what I need to do on my FTD, I need to create the static route for this network. For routing, what we'll do, we'll create a static route, plus we'll also create a default route.